So today we're going to go over this piece of clay because that's one of the things students always ask me. How much does this weigh? Especially advanced students. This is about 2.5 pounds of clay. I'm going to be doing a 6-inch cylinder demo with this right now. So this pad of clay is from earlier. I had another piece of clay. I'm just going to take my ball of clay, slam it down, and then you want to push it onto your wheel head. Make sure it's adhered on there so it doesn't fly off on you. And then with this piece of clay, I'm going to get my speed going. And first step, of course, is we're going to work on centering. Now, if you have a harder time working with bigger pieces of clay, there's a couple tricks that we can do on centering that can help you. Now, if you don't have enough strength to center this much clay, or you want to attempt even more clay, some of the tricks are you can actually use your forearm to center as a vise or a brace, and that can help. I usually will center clay that's about 15 to 20 pounds that way. So the other step is, since I wanted this to be a taller cylinder, when I center, I'm going to center my piece of clay higher. And the reason for that is then I get more height sooner. In other words, it saves me some work. It just takes a little bit of practice. So I've centered this to be, you can see, over 2 knuckles tall. So getting closer to 3 inches of centered height. So getting to 6 inches is a little bit easier. I'm going to open the clay. I'm going to use my thumb to start my opening. But you'll see that I'm using both hands together. And my fingers, at this point, I'm going to go down and pull out towards me. And remember, the wider you center will dictate how tall the piece is too. So if you go out to like this far, then you're not going to get that 6 inches very easily. So you want it to be 3 to 4 inches across. Compress the bottom. Make sure moisture, compress the bottom. And you can check the thickness. What happens with cylinders is you want to leave it about 1/4 of an inch at the bottom. Each pull that you do, you're going to lose a little bit of height or a little bit of thickness on the bottom. So they can get thin real easy if you start your dragging and pulling from the bottom center out. Here, I'm going to do my first undercut. And now I'm getting ready to do my first pull. Right now what I'm going to do is recenter the top. So all I'm doing is holding the clay with these fingers like this, and I'm just recentering to fix that in case there's any unevenness. And here's my first pull. And you can see, just working the clay up. Right here, let up gently, compress it, and I recenter my rim. Clean this area up where my fingers will be in a minute because I don't want to hop. Now you're going to see me use maybe a technique you haven't seen as much. I normally teach students to start with their sponge with fingers, then eventually move to fingers pulling. I'm going to, for bigger pieces of clay, anything from 6 inches or taller, I usually knuckle. Adjust the speed a little bit. And inside hand's going to be like this. This hand, I have the sponge with water in there, and I'm going to use this part of my finger to lift up. And here's my second pull. And as I get right here, I start softening my compression. So there's my second pull. So what we're looking for ceramic 2 specifically is you want about 6 inches in height with about 2 pounds of clay. Usually we start with 2 pounds, but 6 inches, about 2.5 to 3 inches wide by 6 inches up is usually 1.75 pounds. And some clay people that have been doing this a long time will tell you they do it with 1.5 pounds. It just takes practice. But the first step is weigh out a couple balls of clay, make sure they're the same. do your first pull, or make your first cylinder, and then see if the second one, if you can stretch it a little bit taller, and then the third one a little bit taller. But remember, the wider you go, the shorter, the harder it's going to be to get that height. Now I'm going to show you a step. Let's say you end up at 5.5 inches, which a lot of my students over the years always end up a little bit short on their pull. And by this pull, after the second pull, most of my clay's into the body of the piece, and I can't get my hand in there very well. Okay, so what I'll do is go to the center, compress, and do what's called combo pulling. Is actually I start my pull in the center of the piece, then here work my way up slowly to the top as I pull. So now I've thinned out the upper half. Remember, we trim a lot on the lower half. So by pulling the upper half thinner like this, one, it just gave me additional height, and two, it's less trimming on this half. And I might need a little bit more trimming down here. Okay. So for your first cylinder, 6-inch cylinder attempts, all we're looking for is basic cylinders. Once you've made a cylinder form, then I'll be telling you to start experimenting with the cylinders and to start creating things like defining rims, like what I'm doing right now, to the body of the piece, to taking your metal rib. You can do decoration as you go up. So here's a spiral. And you can see that I've created this spiral. And then once you get to this, you'll go like, Mr. Luna, I got up to the 6 inches. What do I do next? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cylinder and actually go back to the bottom. And I'm going to take my finger, push in, and twist it up and make a spiral all the way up. Just because that's how I prefer my bigger coffee cups. I like spirals on them, like this. Partly because when I put a handle on it, I look for a spot where this spiral is, where my hands fit and lock into the side of the piece. The other thing, I'm going to compress my rim. Normally I have a little piece of plastic, and I'll push the sand back in on the rims because the sand can make the glaze a little bit rougher. Then I'm going to take my wood knife, cut off this extra little piece of clay, and that's going to save on my trimming later. But it also breaks the seal a bit more, so I can actually pick this up off the wheel since I'm done. So I'm going to remove that ribbon, take my cutoff wire, cut it, and then move 90 degrees, cut it again, dry my fingertips, grab a board, put it next to me, pick up as I twist, and this cylinder is now done. So I can later on, of course, trim. I could put a handle on it. I could decorate it in different ways. But that's our goal, is working on getting just straight 6-inch cylinders. Once you have a 6-inch cylinder form like this easily, then we're going to start talking about how you can define the shapes and change the forms in space.